Welcome everyone to the African Forum on Green Economy, Investing in Natural Capital for a Resilient Africa. We'll just give it another couple of minutes to allow everyone to join, and we're very much looking forward to this.
That's fine, Mark.
Thank you, Barry. I can see we've now got 44 participants already. We had 250 register for this today. So lots of interest in this topic on water. For those of you just joining, we'll just give it another minute or so to allow others to join. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the African Forum on Green Economy, Investing in Natural Capital for a Resilient Africa. As most of you will be aware, we were planning this to be a face-to-face event. We were planning this to be a face-to-face event held in Kampala this month, but obviously due to the present circumstances that we're seeing, we've decided to move this online. And this is a great opportunity. Sometimes out of adversity comes opportunity. And we believe that by doing it this way, we can still engage with many people and many more people around Africa and around the world to engage around this important issue on water. We hope that you are all safe and well with your families at the moment, and thank you so much for joining us at this complicated time. I know it's not always easy to even get internet connections to be able to join to these events, but I'm sure we're going to have a very exciting session today. And this is the first of a 3-month-long exchange on how economic systems in Africa can change and how we can reflect the value of nature in that decision making. We have other sessions coming up after this on agriculture, on finance, on infrastructure, on data, and then finally on enabling change. And all of this, you can engage with us through the forum that we've put onto a website, through discussion boards. But today we're going to have some really great speakers providing us with some content and some ideas around water. For us, it's really important, and my name's Mark Goff, by the way, from the Capitals Coalition, which brings together the Natural Capital Coalition and the Social and Human Capital Coalition. For us, it's really important that all people that are involved in a decision are included in the conversation. So many decisions are made without all of the stakeholders being involved. And for us, part of our change has been very much about how do we make sure that everyone is included in every decision. The Capitals Coalition brings together people around this concept of valuation. And the forum itself has been hugely collaborative organization between many of the people that you can see here on the right, all of these organizations and many others that have been helping to us and encouraging us and contributing along the way. We've pulled out 3 case studies for you today, which we think will demonstrate how broad a value of water can be integrated into economic decisions and landscape governance to develop a green economy. And I'm delighted to have one of the partners who will be moderating this today. We've got Renaud Lepere, and I'll pass it to you to Renaud from WWF to lead us through the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark, for that. My name is Renaud Lepere from WWF France, based in Paris, and I'm the program manager at WWF France. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for the 3 speakers for being here in a very difficult time with the very difficult internet connections on the continent. I would like, of course, to thank a lot Anna for the organization on the side of the Capitals Coalition of the organization of that forum. And I would like to thank a lot Amélie Lemieux from WWF France for putting this together with Anna. So at WWF, we actually we are moderating today for us the access of population to water, its sustainable management and the preservation of ecosystem, which we depend on, of course, for our supply is a central theme of mobilization. Water resources are a natural asset. They are part of the rich natural capital that is in Africa. These natural assets depends on ecological infrastructure, which provide ecosystem services such as erosion control, as well as water quality and water quantity. Hence, it needs to be maintained and accounted for in our development models. In recent years, new methods of intervention of protection of water resources have been developed. All these approaches have in common the mobilization of all stakeholders, of various stakeholders, public authorities, companies, NGOs. They are based thus on partnership developed and with all these actors, because each of those actors has a role to play. During this webinar, we wanted these institutions to share some innovative approaches to integrate the value of water into their operation and decision. Hopefully, you have managed to take a look at the video case study, which is on our website, which is africanforumongreeneconomy.com. And I hope that you've seen those videos and you can have more details. Each of those case studies will be summarized today again briefly in each of 5 minutes maximum for each of our 3 speakers. The discussion is really important, and as Mark said, this was a very collaborative process, and we wanted to be a very an important collaboration between between us as a whole, as we call a community. We will ask the question at the very end, so there will be 3 times of 5 minutes for the 3 presenters, and there will be a 25 minutes open discussion at the end. So please ask questions in the Q&A sections, or you can have like general comments on the chat section. Maybe Anna, you can put the next slide for participants to see that. So use the Q&A button to type your question on the speakers at any point. We will have those questions on the side and we'll ask them at the very end. You will automatically be muted. So of course, if you really want to speak, then you can, you have the button, please click raise hand. And if you want to share a general comment, then you can have a conversation in the chat. So I will just introduce our 3 speakers now. Pearl Gola from SANBI, from the South African Biodiversity Institute, is an ecological infrastructure coordinator, and she will be the first speaker. And we are very honored to have her from South Africa. William Ogwang is the senior program manager at WWF Kenya for the African Reflex project, and we'll talk about a payment for ecosystem services in Naivasha, Kenya. And then our last speaker is coming right from Uganda, right from Kampala, is Beria Namanya, is the freshwater and governance manager at WWF Uganda, and we'll speak about a payment for ecosystem services scheme in Kasese at the west end of Uganda at the border with DRC. So without further ado, I will hand over to Pearl to give a speech, 5-minute speech on the UMGENI ecological infrastructure partnership in South Africa. Thank you, Pearl. I hand over to you.
Thank you, Reno. Good morning, everyone. As already mentioned, my name is Pearl Gola. I am from the South African National Biodiversity Institute, and I am the ecological coordinator for the Greater UMGENI catchment. So today I'll be speaking to you about the UMGENI Ecological Infrastructure Partnership, which we fondly call the UEIP. The partnership is a multi-sectoral catchment level partnership that consists of organizations from a number of sectors, from government, business, civil society, and academic institutions. It was founded in November 2013 with partner organizations signing a memorandum of understanding. We are now on the second year of that 5-year MOU of the partnership, having finished the first 5-year phase in November 2018. The main focus of the partnership is on prioritizing the protection and rehabilitation of ecological infrastructure, particularly for water security benefits. The work of the partnership is really underpinned by research, and we have a very well-developed research component in the UEIP. Yeah, next slide. So just by way of orientation, we operate in the Umgeni catchment, which is in the province of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. The Umgeni is a fairly small catchment, as you can see from the map. It's a fairly small catchment of about 4,250 square kilometers. It occupies less than 5% of the province. However, it supplies water to about 42% of the population of the province, which then makes it a very significant catchment in the province and actually the country as a whole, as it really supplies two major economic centers of the province, Durban and Pietermaritzburg. Next slide, please. So what do we mean by ecological infrastructure? I mean, ecological infrastructure is basically naturally functioning ecosystems that deliver valuable services to people. So we see ecological infrastructure as a nature-based equivalent of engineered infrastructure. And if you look at the diagram on the screen, on the right-hand side, which is SIP 18, there is your engineering infrastructure, which comprises of your water treatment works, your dams, wastewater treatment works, and the works, and the whole distribution system of that. And on the right-hand side, you've got ecological infrastructure that comprises of your wetlands, your rivers, your woodlands, your forests, and everything that is the natural ecosystem. And what we do see, what we do sort of understand about this and then about this diagram is that ecological infrastructure in most cases actually supplements built infrastructure. And in some cases may even be an alternative or it may be a substitute for built infrastructure in areas, for example, rural areas where we do not have those areas serviced by the formal system. Next slide, please. So as a UEIP, we are guided by this concept of collaborative water governance, which really is underpinned by this issue or concept of hydro-solidarity. So that means we recognize that water flows down gradients and it flows across landscapes. And we do recognize the interconnections between your land and water-based activities and the institutions that govern those land and water-based activities. And as a partnership, we have developed a strategy with its own strategic objectives as outlined on the slide. We're looking at strategic investment in ecological infrastructure. We want to improve governance, we want to strengthen institutional capacity, enable the policy environment, and improve the knowledge based on ecological infrastructure in the catchment, as well as try and have some effective collaboration and coordination, as well as co-learning across the catchment, across the institutions in the catchment and the population as a whole. So that is basically what the UEIP is in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pearl, for that very clear presentation. And I just recall everyone that the full presentation is on the African Forum on greeneconomy.com website at the water session page. So now I hand over to Dr. William Ogwe from WWF Kenya. He's a senior program manager of African Reef Lakes program. So William, over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on this particular virtual meeting. I will present payment for ecosystem services in Naivasha, Kenya. Of course, as already mentioned, from WWF Kenya. Next slide, please. So, Naivasha Basin, which is just like the rest of the Kenya, is actually characterized as water scarce. So water is a major concern, a major cause of conflict. And I must quickly add that because of its characteristics, because water is finite, we have used it to bring people together through public-private partnership. And now there's coexistence and really people working together, that collective action on water, given that water is scarce. It's a short drive from Nairobi, northwest of Nairobi. And the catchment, of course, about 3,400 kilometers square, is not that big. It has a lake, which was declared in 1995 as a wetland of international importance, is an important bird area. Close by is a Hell's Gate National Park, which unfortunately is at the moment under being degraded due to geothermal generation. Importantly, Lake Naivasha accounts to almost 70% of cat flower export from Kenya, which translates to 95 million US dollars to the Kenyan economy. So Naivasha is such an important basin, but water is a major concern. We have close to 180 small farm holders in Naivasha, mostly within the middle catchment area. Most of the rivers that drain into Lake Naivasha are from Abadeas, which is one of the few water towers in Kenya. So next slide. So there are several threats really in Naivasha, but I want to zero in into the major threat, which is agriculture. I mentioned that there are about 180,000 small farm holders in Naivasha, and their activities therefore are negatively impacting on Lake Naivasha and the streams that flow down into the lake. So inappropriate agriculture is a major concern, and a major concern as it's contributing to increasing water-related stress, as well as risks to various investments, particularly flower farms that are very, very important to the Kenyan economy. There are also about 1 million people currently in Naivasha, and most of them depend on the flower farms for employment. So poor waste management because of the numbers, major infrastructure development, some ongoing at the moment. We have the standard gauge railway, geothermal that I earlier mentioned, industrial park planned for Naivasha, and the dams. As much as the basin is water scarce, we have seen situations where dams are being proposed on some of the streams that are so important to Lake Naivasha. Weak institutions, Kenya has got some of the best laws actually in the region, but the problem we have is inadequate enforcement. So that's a major, really, really big concern. So diving into the payment for ecosystem services, of course, this is a voluntary scheme that brings together service providers or service buyers. In this case, these are the flower farms that are downstream. So they're providing incentive for those who are living upstream, mostly small farm holders, to embrace better agriculture or better land use practices, conservation agriculture, so to say. And most of those are being organized into groups, water users association. And what WWF has done is to bring together the buyers as well as service providers. The service here is the ecosystem service, that is the water quality, through a contractual arrangement signed between the RUAS. At the moment, that is being managed by Naivasha Water Users Association, and of course, the RUAS. I've mentioned about the ecosystem services, that is really the quality and of course ultimate water quantity. So we do also monitoring. This is mostly being done by Water Users Association. They capture the information using mobile-based apps, open data kit, and that the information is relayed to a server in WWF, and we put all that information together, do analysis, and then that is what we share with the buyers. They can continue providing the incentives and ensuring that we reduce the stress and, of course, risks to their investments, because the flower farms are really, really important. And we have seen really from the West, there is a push to only source flowers from our better managed basin. So this becomes very, very important. Next. A couple of indicators that this is making a huge difference. We've had so far close to 4,000 small farm holders who are participating in payment for ecosystem services covering up to 240 hectares. But this is a drop in the ocean. We need to get to a threshold so that the impact can be more apparent. At the top, we have the productivity, on-farm productivity, before and after introduction of pests. And you can see really huge difference in terms of production. The lower figure is on stability levels. So there is, the blue is the rainfall, while the other peaks is that of stability. We began the ecosystem payment for ecosystem services towards the end of 2012, and you can be able to see those variations, very high stability levels. But with the time, you realize that because of payment for ecosystem, even when we have really high rainfalls, stability levels are very, very low. Indication that really the terracing, use of napier grass, the conservation agriculture, conservation of soil and water, therefore is making sense. At the beginning, we had only one buyer, that is one private farm providing the incentive. But now we have up to 23, and they are providing close to 14 million promoting promoting conservation agriculture in Naivasha. Next. We love putting smile on people's faces, and this is as a result of payment for ecosystem services. So reducing stress and increasing risks to investment downstream, mostly for farms, but again, providing livelihoods to communities in Naivasha. That collective action on water. In other words, inclusive water stewardship. So we have trained the farmers, but building on pests, as I talked about the threshold. So we got an opportunity through EU, Switch Africa Green, where we've got additional resources to really dive deeper into sustainable consumption and production. And that is ongoing, complementing what we have as part of payment for ecosystem services. And again, we've got additional support from Sweden through CEDA, and they're supporting the communities to amplify their voices, articulating environmental related issues and holding the government to account. That is working really, really well, because the government is getting so much resources from Naivasha. There's need to plow back some of that to safeguard this key ecosystem. In Kenya at the moment, we don't have a sure way of protecting or managing the catchments. Pests can be tweaked to be that model that can enable us to really secure a basin that is water scarce. Next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, William. Thank you very much for that presentation. I recall that your full presentation, 25 minutes presentation, is on the website. I do also encourage everyone to post your question in the Q&A box. This is on the bottom of your screen, rather than just put it in the chat box. I hand over now to Beria Namanya from WWF Uganda. Is the Water and Governance Officer at WWF Uganda. Over to you, Beria. You have 5 minutes maximum.
Thank you. No, again, this is Beria Namanya. I'm a Payment for Ecosystem Services Officer working for WWF Uganda. I'm presenting a case project in the Rwenzori Mountain ecosystem about sustainable financing mechanisms which were developed through payment for ecosystem services based on the water service. Next slide. The project was located in the Rwenzori, bordering DRC. The part of Uganda covers around 995 square kilometers, and it covers around 5 districts. The Rwenzori ecosystem has its highest peak at 5109 meters above sea level. This ecosystem is designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site and also a Ramsar site. Next slide. This ecosystem is important as far as biodiversity is concerned. It is home to endemic species. As mentioned, it is a Ramsar site as well as the World Heritage Site. Why we are concerned with this ecosystem, it is a water tower. The ecosystem itself harbors around 40 rivers and 20 lakes, which provide over 2 million people who all depend on subsistence agriculture for their livelihoods. And also it serves so many downstream economies. For example, agriculture, that is for irrigation, hydropower generation capacity, mining industries, and cement producing industries. Of course, you cannot undermine tourism because it provides revenue and GDP to the national economy from tourism, especially trekking up to the glacier, which is on the peaks of these mountains. Next slide. Sustainable financing for Rwenzori Mountains National Park looked at this ecosystem and it engaged different stakeholders, but this was done through research. Scientific baseline studies were undertaken. For example, the preliminary hydrological and agronomic study, which determined all the degraded hotspots around this ecosystem, and it went ahead and assessed the potential sustainable land management practices on the ecosystem, which could deliver the watershed services downstream. And from this study, it found that the interventions in the agricultural area could significantly influence flows and sediment yield, because most downstream economies, for example, the power producing companies and the water utilities, what they were facing is sediments as a result of erosion from the slopes, especially when water comes out of the park. So the project went ahead and did the socio-economic study, which involved all stakeholders to determine the financial and institutional parameters for the payment for ecosystem services scheme. So they were defined at this stage through these studies, and also through this socio-economic study, it designed the recommended monitoring system. That is the monitoring, reporting, and verification framework for delivering the water services downstream. Then it also did the evaluation study to determine the contribution of these watershed services to the local and the national economy. And these studies, the evaluation study, explored the business cases to present arguments. It defined the opportunities and risks to the private sector, which were identified, so that we can rely their support to finance this conservation financing in the catchment, which is the Nyamwamba catchment. And at this stage, we identified around 26 companies, which we presented advocacy briefs and the business cases, so that we can rally their support to the conservation financing. This graph shows how one of the cases, which was presented to one of the power producing companies, showing how if they could implement interventions around 20% of their area around their intake, how they could reduce sediments concentration on their intake if they implemented this intervention with the upstream communities above their intake. Next slide. Through these studies, The PES institutional structure was also defined, where investors, including mining companies, hydropower companies, including donors, could put money together and channel it to WWF. It could channel the money to WWF through MOUs, but we had the Water Use Association, which we were working with together as WWF, because we realized that the Water Use Association did not have enough capacity. So strengthening capacity of this water association was very important, so that we can strengthen their financial governance mechanism to continue operating the scheme even when WWF is not there. So it was like a sustainability and exit strategy. And through this water association, through performance contracts from the water user groups, with the farmers who were registered by the water user groups, could reach. There was another parallel arm, which is the stakeholder forum, where the scheme could be discussed, or the monitoring, or the reporting mechanisms, or the payments could be discussed in this forum before the payments are made to the water user groups and the farmers. Next slide. Through the studies and through the implementation, we have seen we engaged 26 private sector companies, including mining companies, hydropower companies, water utility companies, and advocacy briefs, as mentioned, and the business cases were presented to all these companies in order to build their capacity and to present a case to this private sector. We had to take them to Naivasha, which has been presented by my friend William, so that they could learn and exchange ideas so that they could contribute to this conservation financing. As a result, we are seeing now around $236 from the privates being channeled to watershed management, to Rwenzori Mountains National Park, and more money is being fundraised and has been committed to do the same intervention outside Rwenzori by the private sector. Next slide. Yeah, this is the growth of the private sector in terms of amount committed and secured for conservation financing. And these are some of the cement producing companies, hydropower companies, water utility companies since 2013, how money has been flowing. And we have seen more private sector, even outside these catchments, committing to watershed management for conservation financing. Next slide. Strengthening capacity of the upstream farmers who were the service providers was very key. We had to identify training of trainers, the TOTs, whom we trained, and they also went and trained farmers in these interventions, which were identified by the hydrological and agronomic study. And these trainers, we have seen training over 300 individual farmers who are now implementing sustainable land management and water management interventions to deliver the services downstream. Next slide. In order to initiate the PES implementation, the project had to support farmers with the farm tools and seedlings so that they could initiate implementation of these interventions on their plots so that they could deliver services downstream. Next slide. Yeah. Monitoring of the inputs, outputs, and the activities, outcomes, and impacts for the PWS scheme was very key. And we had to develop monitoring templates from the time when we are doing awareness meetings, and that is the FPIC process, that free, prior, and informed consent. And these farmers and water user groups express through their water user groups interest. And from there, we do the baseline and land management plans for the individual plots committed to the scheme. Then the contract agreements between the farmers and the water user groups, also the private sector MOUs that were identified for committing to the scheme. Then there is progress and compliance monitoring forms, which we use to assess progress for 1 year at mid-year and compliance monitoring form at the end of the year. Then also there is hydrologic monitoring form plan template, which is used to monitor the water quality and quantity after implementing these interventions upstream, so that we can deliver these watershed services to the people who are committing to the scheme. And all these templates were designed and put into a database management system to monitor the inputs, the activities, the outputs and outcomes and impacts. Next slide. Through the studies and the implementation, the studies took around 2 years to prepare for the scheme, and we came up with the base manual, and the implementation for now 2 years, we have started seeing benefits to the upstream farmers from community awareness. Within the 2 years, we can seeing some incomes being raised by farmers, those ones who enrolled into the scheme. Of course, this was voluntary, but at the end, we have seen farmers benefiting from implementing these sustainable land management and water protection measures to deliver the services downstream. Next slide. Yeah, this is the path, our sustainable land management interventions to deliver the services downstream can increase incomes to the benefits. You can see some men who have started increasing their benefits through sale of milk, and through these interventions, they can get fodder material to feed their cows on smaller pieces of land, which they own and which they committed to the scheme for sustainable land management. Next slide. Yeah, of course, increased yields and productivity are potential now, and they are evident. Through 2 years of the implementation phase, we have seen 992 farmers committing these plots around the 456 hectares, which are under this sustainable land management. The payment mechanism is through all these farmers, through the stakeholder forum, was recommended they open bank accounts in order to build their capacity to continue saving. And all these farmers have opened bank accounts where those ones who have performed according to their contracts, money is channeled through these bank accounts, and are all of them are operating. Then through the baseline studies, we designed a PACE manual, which is now guiding the national PACE implementation in the country, and it has been taken up by the National Management Authority to replicate PACE in the country. Next slide. Yeah, those are the people who were implementing the sustainable financing mechanisms for RNP project. It was funded by EU, then also co-financing by FFM, that is the French GEF, Global Facility for the Environment. And these are some of the private sector we have worked with to implement the payment for watershed services scheme. And the implementing partners, it was mainly WWF and the National Management Authority and Uganda Tourism Board, in order to market the products which were being raised through the PACE scheme, and Uganda Wildlife Authority on the side of the management of the park, and of course through the government, that is the Directorate of Water Resources and Management, which were mostly concerned with the water monitoring, and the district to local communities and local governments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Beria, for that presentation. And I have to add that there is an excellent movie again on the African Fund for Green Economy.com website. Thank you for the three speakers for this excellent presentation. Two things before we move to question and answer. The first thing is that we will not be able to answer all those questions, all your questions in the chat box and in the Q&A box. So what we will do, the one that have been not answered, then we will answer those on the website directly, either on the water session page or on the discussion page. So please stay tuned on the website to make sure that all the answers are given to you. And the second thing is that we can extend by 15 minutes. So we will run until the next 20 minutes. So for those ones that have other calendar, of course, you can go away in 5 minutes. But for those ones, and I'm part of it, are very interested in the question and answer, then we have still 20 minutes to go up to let's say up to 1 East African time, if I'm correct. So we had several questions, many questions have been in the Q&A box. The first group of questions is, of course, around the critical role of the private sector. And this is, of course, the major part of all those case studies. So there was a lot of question on how did you involve the private sector? That was directed to Pearl, of course, on the South African case. That was also directed to Beria in terms of what is the type of support that was given by the private sector, whether that payment, whether that cash, whether that in kind. And there was also a question, it's not only about how the private sector positively contribute to the payment for ecosystem services or to the watershed management. It's also about how they do no harm to the water catchment management. And there were several questions about SAPI and Mondi in, of course, South Africa. So Pearl, you would have to answer those questions. So let us be very quick, like 1 minute per speaker, maximum 1 minute per speaker, on the role of the private sector in each of your case, especially Pearl, on the role of the private sector, which you haven't really touched on, and on the role of SAPI and Mondi. So let's start with Pearl.
Right, thanks for that question. So in terms of the partnership, in the last 5 years of the partnership, which is the first 5-year phase, we have really had difficulty engaging the private sector. And to address that, we embarked on a project that was led by WWF South Africa, which looked at enhancing ecological infrastructure finance, and they looked at both private sector finance and public sector finance, and they made some recommendations in terms of what mechanisms we can use to involve the private sector in the investment in ecological infrastructure. And I guess 2 of those that really we have been taking forward is this concept of public-private partnerships and also the water funds. So we are in the initial stages of looking into seeing if we can't set up a public-private partnership for the partnership. And we've recently gotten finance from Partnership for Green Growth and Global Goals to see if we can't look into how we can do that. And we are also engaging and collaborating with the Nature Conservancy, who has established a water fund in the Western Cape, in Cape Town, the city of Cape Town. And now they are looking into coming to KwaZulu-Natal and see if we can establish a water fund in eThekwini. So those are the 2 major components of how we aim to involve the private sector, guided by the research that was done. In terms of Mondi and SAPI, we've always had Mondi and SAPI as partners in the partnership, and that has really been the fact that the commercial forestry are really, they do have water as very visible in the water in their value chain. So they have an interest in investing in ecological infrastructure for water security benefits. What we have been looking into, though, is getting other sectors, other industries involved, like your retail industry, your finance sector, to also get involved in investing in ecological infrastructure, because even though they're not really, water is not really visible in their value chain, it is indirectly, they do directly benefit from water security. And they actually do use water, and they have an effect on the catchment, regardless of how big or small that effect is. So we are looking, that's one of the things that we have been looking forward to in this next 5-year phase of the partnership, is involving the private sector in a very meaningful way.
Thank you very much, Bill. Let me move to Beria very quickly. Beria, in 30 seconds, how did you make business cases for the private sector, and how did you embark them? And then the same question for William just after, in 30 seconds. So sorry for being very short in order to be very reactive. Beria.
Thank you, Hono. Engagement of the private sector in Uganda is a multidisciplinary task, because we identified around 26 companies, and all of them, they were doing different activities, and most of the private sector we were dealing with, they were making profits. So the business cases were identifying the risks and opportunities for investing into the scheme, so that they can continue benefiting from the water services downstream. And these cases, for example, the hydropower companies, they could benefit through, because they were spending a lot of money and losing a lot of revenue through sedimentation and siltation. And the business cases could spare out how much revenues could be increased if they invested in this sustainable management as a result of reduction in, like, for example, shutdowns, because they could spend a lot of time shutting down their utilities because of the sediment when they are doing the desilting, when they are doing servicing of the turbines, and that lost revenue was being reflected in those business cases, so that they could commit financially to investment in sustainable management to reduce the risk of sedimentation and siltation in their intakes. And also, the saving could be in terms of reducing the maintenance costs, especially the replacement of turbines as a result of a silt entering into their turbines, and they were replacing the turbines every 2 years. And these business cases could spare out how much they could reduce by investing in the sustainable management upstream.
Thank you very much, Beria. I think your internet connection is a little bit unstable. So let me move to William on the same question of the private sector, and I link it to another set of questions that I was really asked by a lot of participants, is of course the role of the issue of sustainability. How are you making sure in Naivasha, but also that would be the same question in South Africa and in Uganda, how do you make sure, maybe with the private sector, that the project will be sustainable, will be financially sustainable, even after WWF or SANBI or governments are moving out of the project? So the issue of private sector and the issue of financial sustainability. William, over to you.
Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, Naivasha is very, very important as far as flower industry is concerned. And the flower industries, of course, is pretty water demanding. And I also mentioned that Kenya is a water scarce country. The basin, Naivasha, is also water scarce. Therefore, it's a huge risk really to the flower farm. And that is why there's need really to secure the catchment. We identified, Naivasha is actually one of the best studied basins in Kenya. We identified that the gap in far as in water resource management in Naivasha is the inappropriate agriculture by the small farm holders. So if that could be fixed, then you reduce the current increasing water stress and therefore risk for the investments. So that was pretty clear to the investors, the flower farms. And as I mentioned earlier too, that people are now paying attention. You know, where you're exporting the flowers, people want to see that they're sourcing from a sustainably managed basin. And that is, WWF really came in and as a convener, we're very good in playing that role. So bringing the stakeholders together, that is the beginning of water stewardship actually in Kenya. So that collective action collective action on water. Naivasha is very close to Nairobi. So that proximity makes Naivasha to be a preferred area for conference tourism. So again, water becomes very, very important. And that is really why it provides a very compelling business case to secure water and therefore reducing risks to these many investments. In terms of sustainability, what we've done is work very closely with the communities and really presenting this as a way of not just securing the environment, but their livelihoods. So if they did good to the environment, promoting sustainable consumption and production, or just conservation agriculture, you realize that it's not just about putting food on the table, but this can enable them to have excess and have some money to put in the pocket to take care of other needs. So because of that, many people are seeing this as a livelihood, a source of livelihood. So they're not waiting again for incentives from the private sector. Of course, we're still doing that, but they're now taking it upon themselves. That is really, this is good for them and also good for the environment. And then we have the Water Users Association that is now driving the coordination effort. We put all the information together, the analysis, that this is making a difference, sharing that with the buyers, and in this case, the flower farms and the hotels, so that they can continue providing this. But one thing that I want to add is that we saw that for us to meet that threshold, because we're talking about 3,000, 4,000 farmers out of 180,000, this is where we saw an opportunity through the EU Switch Africa Green to implement the Green Economic Strategy and Implementation Plan in Kenya. And this enabled us really to dive deeper, you know, introduce bookkeeping, soil testing, so certain things that were not being supported through payment for ecosystem services. And now the community is seeing that there are certain practices that if they embraced, they could actually be better off in terms of livelihood and also secure the environment. So we have that trust in the community, and now they're able to see that we're doing this not just for the environment, but for their own good, and therefore that sustainability aspect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, William. Very interesting to see that actually payment for ecosystem services, they're not only a contractual arrangement, they are also a governance system, and they are also a way of generating livelihoods for excluded communities. So that's really important to see that the PES system is way broader than just a contractual agreement. Moving to Pearl now, my question is, of course, first of all, on sustainability, how do you make sure that there's sustainability in your project even after Sanbi moved out? And moving to another question is, and that would be for William and Beria as well after Pearl, how do you make sure that actually ecosystem services are really provided? How do you monitor, how do you see that actually sedimentation has reduced, that the water quality has increased? And it leads me, of course, to science, and it leads us to another question that was asked in a Q&A box that was about citizen science. So the question is, for you, Pearl, is about sustainability, but also about monitoring and science and citizen science to make sure that the water quality and quantity is actually increasing thanks to the project. Over to you, Pearl.
Thanks, Rainer. Okay, so I'll start with the question of sustainability. UEIP is a partnership, not a project, which is the fundamental of sustainability. So it's a partnership that embarks in projects. So we undertake projects as a partnership. So I'll make an example of one of the projects that we're undertaking as SANBI at the moment. So at the moment, we've got a global environmental facility project that we are undertaking that was launched in 2018. So that looks specifically at unlocking biodiversity benefits through development finance in the water value chain. And part of that project is really demonstrating this at a catchment level. And the Umgeni catchment is one of those demonstration catchments. And what we're looking to do in the Umgeni catchment is to actually enhance organizational capacity and investment in ecological infrastructure to improve water resource management. So that means we are actually working with the institutions that have a defined mandate of water resource management in the catchment. So institutions like your Proto Catchment Management Agency and your bulk water utility like Umgeni Water. So we're working really closely with them to enhance their capacity in terms of looking at ways of managing ecological infrastructure for water resource management. And when we work with them, we work across the science policy implementation continuum. So we work with them across that range, and we partner with them across that range. And that's basically means we are trying to make sure that when SANBI steps out, those institutions that are mandated to look at water resource management are actually capacitated to do so. So that's how we're ensuring sustainability. And then your other question was around research and monitoring and evaluation. So initially, when we started with the UEIP, we did what we call an investment plan of the catchment. So we did an ecological infrastructure investment plan where we were looking at if we wanted to invest in ecological infrastructure, where would we start? So and we kind of prioritized the catchment, the areas across the catchment. So, and we prioritize the areas across the catchment in terms of, if we wanted to increase base flow, if we wanted to increase sediment retention and so on and so on. And alongside that, there was an element of the financing. So if we wanted to do all of these interventions, how much would it cost us and over how long? So research then has been there to guide us in terms of when we actually do have the funding, where do we start and what institutions do we partner with? And now through the GEF project, what we're looking at is actually developing and monitoring and evaluation, reporting and learning program, where we actually going to be looking at if we do these interventions, are they making a difference?
Thank you, Pearl. Thank you, Pearl. I think your connection is very unstable.
Science is partnered with okay.
Thank you, Pearl.
I hope
Sorry.
that was audible.
Yeah, at the very end, that was a little bit unstable. I guess some of us don't know that new language from the Zoom meetings. So thank you, of course, to all three of you. That was really interesting. That was really inspiring. And I want to thank you, three of you. I want to thank of course, the participants, and I want to hand over now to Mark for closing that session. Just to recall that this is the African Forest for Green Economy.com website, where you will find all the videos, other documents, and where you will find, I hope, in the very next days, some of the answers to your questions we will had, and we will populate the website. So, Mark, over to you for closing.
Thank you very much, Renaud. And I found that fascinating. I think particularly the engagement with the private sector and how that was coming out was extremely clear there. As I said earlier on, thank you so much everyone for participating today, the 3 presentations, and also Renaud, excellent moderation there. So very well done, thank you for that. Keeping us all moving there. I mentioned previously that we have several other events going on over the next 3 months. We're going to be looking at agriculture next in 2 weeks' time, and then on to finance, and then into infrastructure before we move on to data and the importance of data and keeping that to keep the information flowing between all of the different stakeholders. And then finally, we'll be looking at how we can create the change that we need to create a green economy, relying upon natural capital for a resilient Africa. Thank you ever so much. There is other ways to stay in touch. If you want to keep on talking about this, if you want to keep the conversation going, please go onto the website. The website has been passed around through the chat and through the Q&A here, but if you don't know it, it's africanforumongreeneconomy.com. So please do go to that. We're going to continue this conversation over the next 2 weeks. Pearl, Beria, and William will all be involved, and we'll continue to pick up on your questions, hopefully, and be able to continue that conversation with you. And what we want to do here is create an ongoing community beyond these presentations and this webinar, so that we can continue to have these conversations way into the future about these important matters and how we can create a green economy in Africa. So thank you so much for everyone and for all of your time today. I look forward to speaking to you all again in the near future, and we'll speak soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah, question.
Oh yeah, Renaud.
No,
William, is it?
Beria. That's Beria.
Beria,
Yes,
hi Beria. Yeah.
Are we going to be accessing the Q&A session so that we can answer all these questions, because we do not answer them all?
Yes, I guess Anna and Anna and Amelie from the Capital Coalition and the WWF France will go through those questions, and we'll pass on the three speakers, including you, of course, Beria.
Yes, we will make sure. And thank you so much for all the questions. Lots of wonderful questions there. I'm sorry we didn't have time to get through them all, but we will be coming back to you with more detail on that. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day and stay safe.
Thank you all. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.